see here. Welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk Real Estate Investing. I have a great guest for you today, and that is Julie Broad. Julie is a successful real estate investor, a #1 best-selling author, an international book award winner, and she has a long list of accomplishments. It would take me like the whole program to tell you all of them. But her latest venture is called Book Launchers, so we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about marketing and branding, my two favorite topics. So welcome, Julie.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. It's so wonderful to be on your show after knowing each other for so many years.
I know. And you're such an inspiration to so many women and for people in general that have made big changes, because you've made big changes. You've moved from Canada to the US, and you've just done so many different things. I wanted to just have you take us on a little bit of a journey, and how you got started investing and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, you bet. I'll try to give you guys the highlight version. Investing in real estate. So it was 2001, and I had just gotten into working out of university. And I kind of had this realization that it's going to be a long life of working for somebody else. So I started to create what I called my plan B. And my plan B was real estate, something I could do on the side while still working in my job. And I took the money I had saved to go back to school to do an MBA. I took that and put it into my first 2 properties. And I convinced my boyfriend at the time to do this with me. And thankfully we both really liked it and kind of dove in head first. And just kept buying properties. And I think in the second year we bought 5 and just kept going from there, finding new and innovative ways to buy property when you had no money or the banks would say no, all that kind of stuff. By 2008, which, mark that year, as the year. So 2008, I hit this point in the job that I was in where I just couldn't work. I just couldn't work in this job anymore. And I called my husband and I said, I can't do it. I have to quit. And he knew I wasn't saying I have to quit and find a new job. He knew I was saying I have to quit. The problem was he was a commercial mortgage broker at the time. And so I was the breadwinner because, as you know, in 2008, there was pretty much no commercial lending happening. Everything had fallen out. So I was basically saying that salary that we're living on, I'm pulling it out from underneath. And it was scary, but it was actually probably the best thing we could have done, because if you can fall back on real estate in 2008 and survive, live to talk about it, it was really, really tough, but we got through it. And I think that really gave us a foundation to be brave enough to do things like, have a baby, move to a new country and open a new business all in 4 months, which is what happened last year. So yeah, I mean, that part, I set out to be a full-time investor and start a real estate training and education company, which led to my first book 5 years later, mind you. But in 2013, I published my first book, More Than Cash Flow. And I was rejected by Wiley and other publishers. They said, there's already enough generic real estate books on the market. We don't need another one. They gave me the idea of writing about real estate investing for couples, which I didn't really like. But in the end, they turned me down, saying that they didn't think I could sell books. They didn't think I had a strong enough platform to sell books, and which was a big kick. It wasn't just your idea sucks. It was you're not good enough to sell books. So
you're not good enough. You're not good enough.
Exactly. Nobody wants to hear what you have to say. Like that's kind of how I took it. But so after a year of recovering, I ended up self-publishing More Than Cash Flow. And it went to #1 overall on Amazon. So it was ahead of Dan Brown, ahead of the Game of Thrones series. It did extremely well because a lot of people loved the message that I had, which wasn't how to get rich in real estate. It was, okay, listen, a lot of things can go wrong. Like, hey, we ended up the not so proud owners of a crack house, and one of our property managers got charged with manslaughter. Like, we had a lot of things that went wrong. And so I was telling people these real stories. And I think that's really why a lot of people supported it. But that's how I got into book publishing, which is where I am today.
So you moved from Canada to the U.S., which is that's a big deal. You leave behind, I guess you left behind family and friends and everything. And now, did you have your son, I can't remember, while you were in Canada, or was he born in the U.S.?
Yeah, we planned to move. So my husband got into acting a few years ago, which is the beautiful thing about real estate is it does give you options. I said I got into it for plan B. Well, we were kind of getting bored of real estate 24/7. And my husband looked around and I was like, what do you want to do? And he said, well, I'd love to be in a rock band or be an actor. And he doesn't play any instruments. So I was like, well, maybe acting is more realistic, but he loves it. He loves it so much. And so that, that was kind of something he was already doing. So life was already kind of shifting. And we decided to move to Los Angeles because while there's so much filming going on in Canada, all the decisions get made out of LA.
Okay.
So for him, in his 40s, it's not like he's got decades and decades and decades to build a career. It's kind of like you got to go where you're going to have the best chance to do the things that you're going to love doing. So that was really the driving force behind moving to LA. So we told all our family, hey, we're moving to LA. And then, as life throws you curveballs, and then we got pregnant. So yeah, everybody's like, so you're not going to move now, right? No, we're
moving. Yeah, I bet the grandparents are going, oh my gosh.
Yeah, it wasn't ideal, but we ended up having the baby in Canada and then moving right after. But yeah, it was a couple curveballs, all wonderful things, but it wasn't meant to happen all at once.
Well, I think that's the thing that people need to understand is it rarely works out like you wrote it down on paper. I mean, you got to have a plan for sure, but then you've got to just be willing to change on a dime.
Exactly. And I think it's important to have an overall destination, but not to expect to know when every light's going to be green and, all these places you're going to stop along the way. You kind of have to just enjoy the journey a little.
Yeah, I agree. So what did you do now? You had property in Canada. So what did you do with that property? Do you still have it or?
Yeah, we have a lot of it. We've sold quite a bit just to fund the move down here and fund the new business. But yeah, we still have it. Like I said, that's really what gives us this option, gives my husband the ability to stay home with our child and then go out for auditions and, do shoots and stuff like that. It really gives him the freedom to do all that stuff. So yeah, we've held on to a lot of it.
Well, I thought that was the case, but I just wanted to be sure. So to be clear, you're in a different country, although they're close, but you are actually managing your property and you're in a different country.
Yes, exactly. And while, yes, we're very similar, we're also extremely different. And we really had a rude awakening when we came down here and realized how many things were dramatically different for us down here. But yes, we have managers in place. So there's people on the ground. But yeah, I'd say, a good chunk of my husband's week is spent still making decisions and overseeing a lot of the things going on with our properties back home.
Okay. So do you plan to add property in the U.S. or is that you're just going to leave it like it is?
Well, we're here on a temporary, we've got a 5-year visa.
Okay.
So, at this point, it's kind of hard to imagine buying property as it is. Our tax situation is a nightmare. We have our Canadian accountant, we have an American accountant, and we have a cross-border specialist. So we're paying an extremely large amount in accounting fees. And that's without owning property here. That's just with having a single corporation down here. So
I hadn't really thought about that part of it. That would be very, very costly, if not a lot of trouble, very costly.
The part that's the worst is the withholding tax. So both countries withhold tax, and then at the end of the year, you have to sort it all out. So on real estate, it's very challenging because they actually will withhold 35% of the rent. Now, as most investors know, 35% of the rent is like the vast majority of your cash flow, if not all of it, because you've got mortgage, you've got all these expenses. So it's tricky. There's a lot of nuances and things that are a giant pain in the butt. But we're sorting it all out, and that's why you hire professionals.
Right. So I know you're really passionate about branding, and I remember somewhere in the middle there, didn't you write a book on branding also?
I did. It's called The New Brand You. And I wrote it and got really into the branding because of the real estate. So as we were, when we hit our peak, we were buying a house every month and renovating it. And that required a lot of capital. So we had to raise a lot of money, but I'm actually a really high introvert. And my husband he's probably more extroverted than me, but he also doesn't like cold calling. He doesn't like, networking with strangers, which is really what you have to do. Not necessarily cold calling, but you really got to network hard. So what I did instead was build a really strong brand so that people called us, people heard about us, and they, would say, hey, I hear you're an investor. I've got some money I want to put into real estate. And so the money started to come to us. And that's really what was behind my branding. Also the training and education company, having people working with us as a coach and workshops. So I wrote the second book, The New Brand You, for people who aren't comfortable selling. And I really wanted to talk about two things. One is, how to be comfortable selling yourself, which was basically creating value and putting yourself out there so people knew who you were, so that people came to you. And then the other piece was also just realizing that little things like who you hang out with, the words you use, how you dress, all these things play such a big role in what other people think of you. As much as everybody says, don't judge a book by its cover, it's just something. As a baby, they even, like, their studies show that it's an instantaneous judgment that happens. And so you want to be careful with what, you want your message to be getting out there the way you want it to be and what you think is the best reflection of you. So that's what the book is about.
So I tell people, if you're not in charge of your brand, if you don't build your brand, one of two things will happen. Somebody else will do it for you by the words they use, which probably are not going to have any resemblance to the truth, or it might be their truth, or you're going to be invisible. So you really, it hasn't been that many years ago that real estate investors didn't even know the word branding. So trying to make them understand what you just said, it's like, what is it, the first 5 seconds or 7 seconds, somebody makes this determination about who they think you are, but it is the way you look, the way you sound, the way you carry yourself, and all of those things.
Yeah, it makes it's funny. I was just laughing because you people here, if they're watching the video, they can see the background. I'm in a co-working space in Los Angeles, but I'm in a neighborhood called Silicon Beach because it's really full of tech. Like Pinterest is on my floor here. Yahoo, Google, AOL, like all these big,
all the cool kids.
They're all in this neighborhood. But it's funny because somebody made a joke to me the other day. He's got a company on this floor, and he said, yeah, the way they dress around here, I don't know if they're bums or billionaires. But I mean, same thing. Like, he doesn't know them, but they're, it's that judgment piece, and we can't help it. And I think if you're a real estate investor, it's so easy to be like, well, I'm going to wear my grubs and not shower because I'm going to go out to my dirty property and clean floors later, or remove the drywall, whatever it is. But if you run into somebody day in, day out, and they see you always looking grubby, they're not going to think you're successful. They're not going to think, hey, I need to ask this person what they do. I'm curious about them. So, I'm not about wearing a 3-piece suit, but, dress in a way that you feel proud of yourself and you can carry yourself so that people are curious about who you are.
Yeah, and there's my daughter laughs at me because she has horses, so you can picture that. It's not unusual for her to have a piece of hay stuck out of her hair, but I said, and you have 2 college degrees, why? She's so we talk about that often. She said, sometimes I have to remind myself, I'm going on appointments and I've got to run out and take care of the horses, and then wait a minute, which person do I need to be? Can I be the hidden person over here in the hay, or do I have to be there?
Yeah.
Because it is important. You have to show up the way you want people to see you.
Mm-hmm. Very much so. And I don't think it's about being someone you're not, right? Like, I think, I want to make that point. It is about being you, but it's being about when you feel your best, that's really the person that you want to take to that networking meeting, that association meeting, or even to the doctor, because, hey, your doctor might want to invest in real estate.
Yeah. And, it's so interesting that you say you're an introvert. I know more introverted people that are speakers. And I think one gal, a friend of mine that you met when we were at Podfest together, she's like painfully introverted, but she's done stand-up comedy. And I go, I can't even wrap my brain around how that works. But, she says it's totally different. So I think it is, I guess, a way of just thinking about yourself. But there are so many introverts that are successful speakers. I just find that whole thing fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, my perspective on it is twofold. One is that it makes it easier for me to network, because when I speak and come off the stage, people come to me. So I don't have that pressure of having to go meet people, which is also why building a brand was so strong. People would come to me, and it just is so much more comfortable. The second thing is, I think introverted people spend a lot more time reflecting. And I think that often translates into a better talk, because you're offering insights that some other people don't have. And part of that's just because you've spent more time kind of watching, reflecting, and kind of soaking up the atmosphere rather than trying to meet every single person, which has its merits too, right? Like there's good to both, I think.
Well, yeah, and I think equality over quantity when it comes to networking.
Yes, always.
Yeah. So let's talk about your speaking career. So for somebody out there that might be wondering, how did you go from, I'm a real estate investor and I'm rehabbing houses and doing buy and hold? I guess buy and hold is still your primary strategy. Correct. So For somebody that might be asking, how do I get from over here to over there on the stage? Give them some practical tips for how they do that.
I mean, for me, it really changed when I wrote my first book. I don't think you have to have a book, but it sure makes things easier, because when somebody booking a speaker is looking and there's two comparable people doing the same thing, and this one's written the book, they're going to go with the one that's written the book every single time. Yeah, and I found the same thing with TV media and radio interviews. Once I had my book, I was, you pitch them and you pitch them the same pitch before the book, but with the book, now suddenly you're the author of, and it changes everything. So I really think, if speaking is your goal, you really need to seriously put some effort into creating the right book to get you in front of the right audiences to, to achieve that goal. If you really don't want to write a book, then I think the next best approach is to really go out and start local. So start with your local meetups, your local associations, and, build a bit of a demo reel so people can see you speaking. But, filling out for some of these big events that I speak at, one of the questions is, include a link of you talking and what books have you written? It's not have you written? What books have you written?
What books have you written?
That in mind.
Interesting. Very interesting. So let's talk a little bit about book launchers. I know it's a company you're very passionate about. So let's tell people about book launchers.
Yeah, you bet. We help people write, publish, and sell nonfiction books. And really why I created the company is because of my journey self-publishing and having to hire all the pieces. So, my goal was to have a book that's the same quality as a traditionally published book, because I'd rather actually talk about professionally published versus not professionally published. And so I wanted it to look exactly like the book that I would have had if I got the deal with Wiley, so it could sit on bookstore shelves, which it does. But I had to hire all the pieces because there was no company that helped people from start to finish. And doing this, what I realized, thankfully I had a bit of a marketing brain. So I was already thinking marketing before I wrote the book. But a lot of people that came to me for help after I wrote my first book and it did well, they had a finished book and they hadn't thought through marketing. And so I thought somebody needs to be helping people from day one, when they have an idea or they have a first draft, and help them think about, okay, how am I going to market this book? Who's my ideal reader? And what do I need to do to make sure this book is going to appeal to them and achieve my goal? And I wanted the dream team of everybody in between to do that. And so that's really why I created book launchers, so that somebody's thinking about marketing your book from day one, and you don't have to worry about the 15 different professionals that you need to hire along the way. We have them all, and they all know the goal of your book. So they're always working towards making sure your book achieves that goal.
So if someone has written a book, and let's say it's just mediocre, so you can help them up the book. Well, I'm not really sure how to say that. Make it a better book. You can do the cover, you can do the editing, you can do all of the pieces, get them on Amazon. Because I think that's where some people that are writers, they get hung up. They actually know that there's this whole other big piece to the puzzle, and they're going, no, I don't know how to do any of that.
Yeah, and I mean, so some people are writers and they get stuck with that. Some people aren't writers, but they have a great message to share. So we have writing coaches and ghostwriters to help kind of craft that. But yeah, we have Emmy-nominated writers and people who've worked on Wall Street Journal bestsellers all working on our team to help you from every stage. But yeah, we've got multiple editors because most of these people that we're working with have never written. They've barely written articles, let alone books. So we have content editors, copy editors, proofreaders, and writing coaches that'll all look at the work to help make sure it's a fantastic book at the end that's so much easier to market than if you just kind of just write a book
and kind of throw it together and get a cheap cover somewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
I get people send me books because I'm a reader and I like to review books on my blog. And most of the books that come are nice books, but every now and then I get one that's just like, what the heck? It's like, you can tell there's been no editing. There's no periods, lots of commas, you just look at it and go, oh my gosh, you'd be better off without a book than a poorly written and published book.
Yeah, I mean, it's like showing up in sweatpants and running shoes to me. Like if you have a bad book, that what does that say about your brand? I would say you want to be proud to hand that book to anybody. So picture kind of the person you think is at the pinnacle of success, whether it be like Mark Cuban or whoever it is. Imagine meeting that person and going, "Hey, I've written a book," and handing it to them. And if you're embarrassed, then you haven't put enough effort into getting the right professionals on it. And I get it. Some people are on a budget and that's really important, but there's still ways to accomplish a professionally published book. You're going to have some professionals work on it, but maybe you can do a service trade or something. But you're right. I think otherwise wait until you can create a better book, because in a lot of cases you're doing yourself a disservice by putting a terrible book out there.
A terrible book. That was kind of my opinion. So if someone could come to you then, if they had an idea, maybe they're really, whatever their niche is, real estate investing or something, it could be anything. So they could come to you and they could say, I'm an expert in this, and I want to have a book on this, but I'm not a writer. So you have the resources then to get that book out of them.
Yeah, you bet. So we have two kind of approaches. One is the writing coach. So that person would work with you to get your hook and then help you craft the outline and really make sure you've got a strong table of contents that'll appeal to your ideal reader. At that point, the writing coach can coach you through writing. And we do that in two ways. One is the writing coach will work with you to kind of get a templated first chapter, and then you can follow that template. The other thing is that you can speak it. So we have clients that will, using that granular table of contents, they'll speak each section, get it transcribed, and then we'll just content edit it to the point that it sounds like somebody wrote it versus spoke it.
Okay.
So those are kind of the one option. The other option is have a ghostwriter do it all for you. Yeah. And the ghostwriter you're still the author. It's still you. It's still your voice. The ghostwriter is basically interviewing you and then it's almost like the content edit, but they're just doing it at a deeper level to extract the content from you, still based on that outline that you create at the beginning.
Okay. So once you've got your book, and let's say you're not Julie Broad, you're somebody that nobody knows about, but you've got a book, then would you agree that it's kind of, you could kind of practice? I think you touched on this at the local level. Maybe go to the local groups, whatever they are, and kind of do they need a speaking coach first? What's the next step for them?
It depends. Some of the people that come to us have done some talks. They have training and education programs, so they have some of their content. So it really depends. The answer is it varies. One of the things we do is help them book people on into speaking events. But we would start locally if they haven't done any talks. We'd also focus on podcasts. Podcasts and radio is a really great way to get yourself used to being interviewed at a lower expense than when you're standing in front of an audience. Because, at the end of the day, very few podcasts are live. So if you're really bomb, they're probably just not going to air your episode.
Or they're going to probably say, listen, that didn't record. Could we redo that again?
Exactly. So it's a lower, not a lower quality. It's a lower risk, I think, versus standing up in front of a live audience and not doing well. But we would kind of assess all that based on the person, their experience, their network, and really try to figure it out for them and help them create a plan that will make sense for them. Because you're not going to book big stage. Just because you have a book, you're not going to book a big stage right out of the gate if you haven't done any talks, nor would you want to. Having gone myself, actually, I spoke once at a local real estate meeting, and then was asked to speak in Toronto in front of a huge national magazine's audience of, I can't remember if it was 300 or 600. Either way, it was an enormous audience. Yeah. And it was really, I blacked out. Not that I fell down, but I was so nervous that I actually have no memory of the
whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I was so nervous to go from, little audience to giant audience.
And it is hard, but I do think podcasters, if you've been on podcasts, you have an edge because you've gotten used to talking people. Even people that are really introverted can do podcasts, and you can sound at ease more on a podcast. And then after a time, I think then it really does just get easier is what I tell people, the live stuff. And I always like to tell people, start small and think of it as a conversation. As you're just delivering information, you're not a speaker, you're just there to teach or whatever. I think some part of it's a mindset. You get this whole public speaking thing, and you just totally people totally freak out.
Yeah, it's funny. I have two quick thoughts on that. One is to always remember there's some, one person in the audience that you can help, rather than worrying about what people are going to think about you. Just focus on that one person that you know you can help with your message. That kind of lowers the stress. The other thing is I spoke at this one event, and I don't know, there's 120 people in the audience, and I flubbed up I was going, everything was going great, and then all of a sudden I just blanked, and I thought, I kind of looked at the audience and went, I just lost my train of thought. I don't know what I was going to say. And so I completely blanked, complete flub. Took me it felt like forever, but it was probably only 60 seconds. And then I just picked up and went somewhere else with what I was saying. A woman came up to me after, and she goes, you're an excellent speaker. She goes, but I didn't really like you until you messed up. And then I realized, hey, she's just like me. So, I mean, people don't want you to be perfect. That's kind of my point of that story is I think we put too much pressure on ourselves to be perfect when people don't relate to perfection. So, like I said, focus on helping people and helping that one person in the audience.
Well, and I think there's a lot of truth to that. If you say, hey, I messed up, people can say, okay, she's just like me because I mess up. Well, if you had, I don't know, looking at all that you've been through, I mean, because everybody starts at the beginning. That's what I like to tell people. Julie didn't start out, the Julie you see today didn't start out the Julie you saw before. And this is the same for everybody. So if you could tell somebody that's really struggling with this, being back at the beginning, and they cannot see their way forward to doing whatever their dream is, what advice do you have for those folks?
Well, I think it always comes down to just taking action. Figuring out what's the next thing you can do and just taking that step and then taking the step after that. And if you do that consistently, you'll be really surprised at how far you come in what feels like, when you're in it, it feels like it's taking forever. But then when you get a year down the road and you look back and you've consistently done something every day to move yourself forward, it's like, I've gone this far. And it's incredible to see how far you go when you do that. So, I always like to say the missing piece is always action. Just take a step and keep taking a step.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I know you're a whiteboard fan. I'm a whiteboard fan. And sometimes I write things on whiteboards, and then you write just a simple act of writing them down and you think, well, I'm going to go do whatever it is. But it's truly magical to look back at a whiteboard where you did planning and goals and things, and a year later and go, well, gee, I did all of that. And it was just like automatically, it just all kind of happened.
Yeah, my husband and I were just talking about this morning because there's, he's, as an actor, things take forever. You got to go to 30 auditions to book one shoot. And we were just talking about it. I said, well, it's kind of like losing weight. It's not like you cut out, you didn't eat the donut last night, so now you're going to drop a pound. You just have to do the, kind of just try to be better every single day. And you make progress over the long haul, but you can't think, I did one thing right, so good things have to happen now. That's not how it works. You got to consistently keep going.
You have to actually do the work and take the steps, and I think that is the key though. Just do something every day to move you towards your goal.
Exactly. It doesn't even have to be big, but if you're doing something.
Well, Julie, as always, this was a lot of fun. I want to thank you. I know you're busy. I know it's earlier in California than it is in Kentucky. I'm going to put all of your contact information below in the notes, as well as your books. I can assume they can find all those on Amazon.
Oh, absolutely. Yep.
Okay, so I'll put that on there. And what's the best way for folks to reach you if they have any questions for you?
Yeah, booklaunchers.com is the best place to go and find all my contact information. If you want to interact with me, though, my YouTube channel is my pet project, and I respond to comments really fast on YouTube. So booklaunchers.tv is the YouTube channel. And if you subscribe and comment on any of my new videos, I'm on there pretty quickly because it's my passion project. I love doing YouTube videos.
I know you've always been big into video. I remember that.
Yeah, it's funny. And, you talk about starting over. I had built a very strong base in my YouTube channel. And so it was really hard to go from, 5,000 or whatever I had subscribers on my previous channel over and start with zero. So it was really hard to start over when you've built something and then you got to start something from scratch. But yeah, I'm having a ton of fun, and being in LA, the studios and the video editing talent that I can access here, it makes videos even more fun.
Oh, well, cool. Yeah, I noticed you upped your game in some of those videos. So that explains it. Okay, she's in LA, folks. Well, thanks again, Julie. And like I said, I'll put all your resources, and you all hit Julie up. She's great at what she does, and I can vouch for her. And as always, thanks for listening. And I'll be back next week with another episode of Let's Talk Real Estate Investing. Thanks.